Welcome back to Decode Silicon Valley. This certainly is a tangled web. Tonight's going to be an interesting session for us to review. And I just wanted to point out the session that I created first was focused on DARPA, so you'll definitely want to look that one up. The second one was labeled Twitter and it looks like the page fell out here, but Twitter and social media. Tonight, we're going to kind of go over some of the random past of California. Of course, after the Mexican-American War ended in what they say in February 1848, California was already kind of a de facto American possession, according to history. However, the California gold rush began at Sutter's Mill near Coloma, and that was in 1848. So this is kind of the timeline of an overlap of exactly what was going on here. Now, there's a lot of history of who came, how they got here, how they were brought here, and it's actually quite interesting. But we're going to move forward into the switch from the gold rush to the Silicon Valley rush, and the amount of absolute sickening wealth that has come out of Silicon Valley. And I say sickening because in many cases, a lot has been generated. And in many cases, a lot has been taken from taxpayers through government funding to fund programs in order to increase surveillance. And as we look at the venture capital market here in Silicon Valley, and of course, angel investors and those who are trying to get in the game early, catch their horse in the race, we see that there's quite a bit of competition and games that go into this. And it doesn't, there's a very big difference between an entrepreneur and somebody who has a small business. Just because you're running a small business doesn't make you necessarily an entrepreneur, and it certainly doesn't gear you up for the strategies that are required to run a startup that's going to hit an IPO. Now, when you start a business, you want to make sure that you have the exit strategy already lined out at the onset, because as you're pulling in investors, you have to let them know what their return is going to be. And for so many of these companies that launch in Silicon Valley, there's only two exits, and one is the viable one. So the two exits they get to, because they're literally pyramid schemes, collecting more money on top of more money on top of more money to pay off the earlier investors, to pay off those, it's pyramid schemes. And so many of these companies either never make money and go bust, or make a profit and go bust, or just keep reeling it in until they hit the big bust of the big a dollar sign of an IPO, and then shift that to retirement funds to go ahead and bail out the early investors that have been promised a big payout. Uber is a prime example. So what we're looking at is Silicon Valley Gold Rush really launched into a pyramid scheme of manipulation of cash and money. And so there's a lot of stories around the depth of that, but we just got to call it what it is, right? So let's dig into a few other interesting facts here in the San Francisco area. Are you familiar with the Nike missile sites? This is the name where Nike came from for the shoes, right? The Project Nike was a US Army project proposed in 1945. Now here again, the 40s become very, very important in the story. And this was by Bell Laboratories, and they developed a line-of-sight anti-aircraft missile system. The project delivered United States' first operational anti-aircraft missile system. So this would be a land-to-air missile. The Nike Ajax in 1953. A great number of the technologies and rocket systems used for developing the Nike Ajax were reused for a number of functions, many of which were given the Nike name. Now, why am I bringing this up right now? There's a few things. One, you're going to see NASA mentioned here. But another one that I want to talk about that many people are not aware of is Angel Island. So Angel Island is located, this is the San Francisco Bay, if you can see the image here. And in the bay between San Francisco, and then you'll have the Golden Gate Bridge at one end and Oakland would be at the other. And then across the bridge would be Marin or Sausalito. And right in there, you've got Alcatraz, which I'll bring up in a moment. And then there's an Angel Island is the other island there. Now you can ride your bike over for the day. I believe they allow camping there. I don't think there's any structures there except for the park ranger type structures. There's certainly, when I was there, weren't facilities. It was just go for the day and come off. But what's interesting about this is not only as you walk along Crissy Field towards the Golden Gate Bridge, there are a lot of underground hideouts along there. And by hideouts, I mean they're deep underground bases and that have either been hollowed out that you can walk through, or some of them still have the huge metal door over brick buildings for the tunnels that go down under the city in case there is a bomb attack. And as you walk along there, you can still see those today. But I wanted to focus. This was a 1958 photograph of 4 of the 12 missiles of D Battery, 9th AAA Missile Battalion at Angel Island. The missiles were stored underground and were raised only for maintenance or firing. The site was raised when the missiles were removed from the island in 1962. Distance from Ayala Cove was 1.75 miles and the estimated hiking time was 50 minutes. So let's see if we can take a peek at this. So I think today it's pretty much still barren as well. I haven't been out there in about 20 years. So of course there could be some change, but it is federally owned. And you can see, you know, just a little bit of what was going on there. But I wanted to see if this other image here would show you. Here we go. Here's 4 of the missiles. This is right here on Angel Island, and they're protecting because they're right there in the bay. So the idea is there were secure facilities and launchers along the coast as well, specifically over on the side where the Golden Gate Bridge is, and then right here in this island area. Okay, so let's go on here. What else is in there? I talked about Angel Island, and everybody has also heard about Alcatraz. Alcatraz has had quite a sordid past as well. Both islands were home for Native Americans, as I understand it. Alcatraz was, of course, Native Americans, in my understanding, quite a bit longer. And at some point, the federal government decided that it belonged to them. I don't know the trade-off or the terms, although I've heard quite a few stories around that. But of course, we do know Alcatraz because it decided it would be a great place for a high security prison. Now, today, you can take a short boat trip from San Francisco Pier on out to the federally run island. And by federal, I mean, of course, they don't do it themselves. They hire contractors for the boat and contractors to maintain the item so that your tax dollar can need to be stretched even further. But Alcatraz Island is located in the San Francisco Bay, 1.25 miles offshore San Francisco. The small island was developed with facilities for a lighthouse, military fortification, and a military base. And see if there's any more. And of course, it has quite an interesting path. The reason that they said that they put the high security prison there was that it was that they couldn't escape from it because of the extremely cold water, the distance, and the sharks. And yet, although there have been stories of escape and stories of individuals who've made it, I will tell you also, when I lived by Fort Mason in San Francisco, the first week in January, and I think it was actually New Year's Day, but I'd have to look for sure, of each year, they would have an Escape from Alcatraz marathon, triathlon rather. And you would see hundreds of people swim from Alcatraz right to the shore there up by where Ghirardelli Square is, and then hop on their bicycles. So yes, it is escapable. And then here we go. We have Wikipedia's explanation goes into this a little bit more. Now, of course, they're noting the factual accuracy here, as so is Wikipedia, but there's just a little more information there. Now, I wanted to take this up a little bit more because, again, I'm focusing on Silicon Valley, right? Silicon of the valley. Now, I wanted to talk again about Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel, of course, was the founder of what became PayPal, right? At some point, they took on an investor, and the investor's name was Elon Musk, and Elon Musk and Peter Thiel had quite a bit of squabbles back and forth, and the stories go quite deep. However, the two of them brought it to the PayPal that we have today. Now, Peter Thiel definitely has stepped into politics and has his own outlook on life, which is very distinct. However, you may recall the idea of Blue Seed. Now, it was Blue Seed. Blue Seed was a Silicon Valley-based startup, and Peter Thiel was a major investor. And it was a seasteading venture to create a startup community located on a vessel stationed in international waters near the coast of Silicon Valley in California. The intended location outside the territorial seas of the United States, 12 nautical miles from the coast of California, in the so-called contiguous zone. And that would enable non-US startup, let's see if that'll click on here. I don't think I had that, here we go. Entrepreneurs to work on their ventures without the need for a US work visa, H-1B. We're going to discuss H-1B holders quite a bit in this series. However, this is a core mention there. So when they say non-US startup entrepreneurs, what they're really looking for at this point, they weren't necessarily looking for the entrepreneurs or the talent as much as software engineers is what they were planning to load on this boat. And by having it out in the waters, the 12 nautical miles off the coast, then the idea is these software programs would essentially be sweat labor, captive in these boats. They're not going home to their families. They're there for, I don't even know the dedicated period of time. They wouldn't be coming ashore because they did not have permission or access to the United States. They did not have to go through the steps to get an H-1 visa because still in international waters. And essentially, they were slave labor ships, call it what it is, right? So let's read a little bit more about this explanation. While living in the proximity to Silicon Valley, they would be in the same time zone. So it would be much easier than dealing with the entrepreneurs that they often use from the Russian area or India or China or Philippines or any of those great areas that have amazing talent. Instead, they'd have them in this time zone. So it would be much more convenient was really what it was. But convenient for who, as these individuals left their families to live on a boat? Just amazing. While living in proximity to Silicon Valley and using relatively easier to obtain business and tourism visas, the B1 and B2, to travel to the mainland, which, as we talked about, was not really the option of what they planned to do. The project received wide media coverage and the promise of funding from venture capitalist Peter Thiel, who also supports the Seasteading Institute, who ultimately did not invest in the seed round. Blue Seed later obtained a $300,000 seed funding, Bitcoin investments, and $9 million from an undisclosed investor, and claimed plans to lease a ship for its platform. The launch was planned for summer of 2014, assuming that $18 million more would be raised. Blue Seed went on hold due to insufficient funds in 2013. Blue Seed was a way to get around the system. There were human rights issues, and there were just a number of reasons why. Just because you can do something doesn't mean it was the right thing to do. And the individuals who founded it are noted back here, and they had quite a variety of major backers. So that's Blue Seed. Here's a little bit more on the Wikipedia site for that. This one right here, some of these got moved. I wanted to talk more about San Francisco then. San Francisco has turned into Gotham. As I lived in the city, there were periods of time that you just had to scratch your head. So for instance, at one point, the mayor decided it was way too much money that they were spending on trash cans and picking up the trash from the city. So what did they do? They removed all the trash cans and then levied fines against the franchises, specifically fast food franchises, for any of the litter that was laid around, because all the disposable containers they had couldn't be put in trash cans anymore as people bought and walked, because this is very much a walking city. And they had to put it somewhere, so they put it down. There's no trash cans, and there you go. I mean, what a brilliant idea. If you don't want trash, take away the trash cans. But here we've got Gotham, arrests made in San Francisco, auto burglaries. This is a city where they smashed your window, and the same window company will gladly replace it for you. Armed robberies targeting New York filmmakers and others. So there's just a series of issues right here. I believe this is, let's see here. Well, anyways, let's continue on to the next one here. This is news about San Francisco's Union Square looting. Of course, in all its brilliance, the Democratic city has decided that it is insensitive to arrest and or punish these individuals whose lifelong considerations must be taken into fact, as they drove up in their cars with their license plates on and smashed once again, and continues to occur around the city. Now, another brilliant idea that they had during the beginning of the whole cootie shutdown, San Francisco lost a lot. They lost a lot of businesses, restaurants had to close, but also hotels had to close. It became unsafe for hotels to operate in San Francisco. And so as the city went through and shut them down with one hand, they went behind with the other with this brilliant idea of moving the homeless individuals, or currently unhoused, though I think the proper term is those who had been currently experiencing unhousing, if that's how we want to phrase it, into these hotels. Now, this is a very beautiful thought, but I got to tell you, why was it unsafe for a paying customer to go into their own hotel room and stay in the city? And so they were condemned or shut down, and yet the homeless were put in. And it wasn't just that they were put into these facilities. The city of San Francisco wanted to really, really be good hosts. So they even delivered drugs and alcohol directly to the hotel rooms using taxpayer dollars in order to make sure these individuals didn't have any break from the substance abuse that they had. And so the taxpayers paid for this delivery as well. Now, you and I both know that there's different standards with various hotels. And if most people go into a hotel, they expect a level of cleanliness. Now, if you've got individuals who are experiencing an unhousing situation, and they have for long term perhaps, that might not be the candidate that you want in that room before you have been in there, especially if they're enjoying what the host has given them. So things like the mattress might need to be changed. The carpeting might need to be changed. There might need to be a little bit more turnaround. And for us who rent property, this is common as well, right? Some people have different ways that they handle property, and some people others. I'm not stating that all people experiencing homelessness are going to create a situation that another person wouldn't want to immediately use it, but there are some different considerations when San Francisco declares that in fact the majority of their homeless population is due to mental illness or addiction. So that might not be the type of person 9 to 5 that comes home and scrubs the walls top to bottom to make sure that it's an OCD scenario. It might be on another end of the spectrum. Yet this was a better, safer option than actually allowing the hotels to stay open and run their businesses. And then, of course, once they are moved out, what happens? San Francisco to extend pandemic homeless hotel program. So no, you cannot have your hotel back. It's pretty much a situation of eminent domain. And San Francisco, as of October 27, stated it will extend its emergency hotel room program for the unhoused people until September of 2022. I kid you not. A decision that could cost the city an extra $21 million. This unhoused official said Wednesday that they need more time to thoughtfully move the hotels into permanent housing. I'm sorry, the people from the hotels, despite more than 1,000 vacant supportive housing. So what's happening is we've learned, specifically as we studied Los Angeles, that that these programs run by the Democrats and the liberals are phenomenal business opportunities. They are raking in taxpayer money through grants and fees left and right, and many never even convert the property for the stated purpose of housing the individuals that they've taken the money for. And in this case, they're saying, hey, wait, you brought these people in off the street. You can't put them back on the street, of course, so they get a whole nother year. Now, San Francisco has a series of renter laws that protect the renter much more than the landowner. We're not going to go through those laws right now, but we are going to talk about counting up rights in a minute. So here we've got the power of the tenants union in San Francisco is massive. And you do see this as a demonstration in very liberal cities, such as Berkeley, San Francisco, and Santa Cruz are some of the top 3. And what happens is, if the individuals, if they can put more individuals in that do not own, but rather rent, they can get these individuals to vote in more programs. And more programs means more flow of capital into those who devise the program solutions, whether or not they deliver. And so the reason that individuals will vote it in and not be land, most of the levies go against property owners in the form of right there on their property tax, right? And so you got these individuals who are paying property taxes that are saying, why am I carrying the crux of the entire city on my shoulders? And I can't even get fair rent because of rent control. Well, we see this specifically around the liberal universities, and all the universities in California happen to be liberal. You may have a bubble here or there, but that's the way they're set up. So you train the students in the classroom that this initiative is coming up. This is why you need to vote this way. You have to have a nice heart. You have to help other people. You have to be kind and giving. You need to vote. And that's why in many other states, they require that you vote. If you're a university student from your parents' residence would be considered a permanent resident, not in the city or state necessarily that you're going to school, so that there is an immediate and direct impact financially. But if you look again at Berkeley, San Francisco, Santa Cruz, these cities are filled with university students who are very kind and caring, will vote in any kind of liberal law, and thus you have California as a sinking ship. What I want to go a little bit more into in the next video is going to be the defense side. Let's just use that word for right now. So we're going to look at 3 top companies. We're going to look, of course, at Lockheed Martin, and we're going to look at General Electric back in the day and what happened there. We're going to explore a little bit about Apple and Hewlett Packard as well. And actually, General Electric had the largest supercomputer that I had ever seen, and that would have been in the early 80s. And I will make sure I get an image of that pulled up here and try to get a copy of that printer for you to kind of giggle with me out of how far we've come. So again, Lockheed Martin, General Electric, HP, and Apple. And then of course, the big one here, you got it, NASA. We're going to discuss a little bit of NASA in the next part of the series. So let's go ahead and round this out so we can close out. This has been Decode Silicon Valley at Tangled Web. This was a little bit more in depth into Gotham, also known as San Francisco, which I'd always referred to New York as Gotham, but now I guess we can call it Gotham of the West. Thank you for listening to Decode Silicon Valley. And as I ask each time, if you only give once in a month, that's okay. You're always welcome here. Everybody's welcome. But I ask that maybe if you'd like to think of me next time, I would certainly appreciate that. And have a wonderful holiday.